Man, sometimes I come across stories that just completely mess with your head. They make you stop and think about what it means to be human, about our weaknesses, our strengths, our desires, and how fragile the line between right and wrong can be. And one of those stories, honestly, one of the most heartbreaking and fascinating I've ever read, is the story of Prophet Yusuf, or Joseph as most people in the West know him, and this woman named Zuleikha. Now, if you've never heard this story before, buckle up because it's a ride. It's in the Quran, and a lot of scholars say it's the most beautiful story in Scripture. Not just because it's dramatic, but because it's human. It's about betrayal, temptation, beauty, obsession, power, suffering, all the ingredients of a crazy Netflix series, except this one is divine revelation. The early struggles of Joseph. Let me give you a little background. Yusuf wasn't just some random dude. He came from this insane lineage. His father was Prophet Jacob, his grandfather was Prophet Ishaq, Isaac, and his great-grandfather was Prophet Abraham. So this is like spiritual royalty right here. But Yusuf's life wasn't smooth at all. From the very beginning, he had people coming after him. His own brothers hated him. Why? Because he was special. He had these dreams that hinted at greatness. He was his father's favorite, and he was, according to Islamic tradition, ridiculously good-looking. Like, not just model good-looking, but the kind of beauty that stops people in their tracks. His brothers got jealous, like dangerously jealous. So what did they do? They plotted against him. First, they wanted to kill him, but then they decided to throw him into a well instead. Imagine that. Your own brothers, the people who are supposed to have your back, literally abandoning you in a dark, cold well. That's trauma right there. Eventually, a caravan passed by, found him, and sold him into slavery. Just like that. One day, you're the beloved son of a prophet. The next day, you're property. Life in Egypt. From slave to household favorite. So Yusuf ends up in Egypt, and he's bought by this high-ranking official, sometimes called Potiphar in the biblical version, but in the Quran he's referred to as Al-Aziz, which means something like the noble or the powerful one. This guy was probably some kind of minister, maybe the head of the treasury or security. Now, here's where things get interesting. Yusuf grows up in this man's household. He's smart, he's trustworthy, and he's got that aura. So naturally, he rises in favor. People like him. Remember, this is a young man who's already been through betrayal, slavery, and trauma, but somehow he doesn't break. He just keeps moving forward. And this is where Zuleikha enters the picture. Who was Zuleikha? Now, Zuleikha was the wife of this powerful man. And let's just be real here. History is full of lonely, neglected wives of powerful men. Guys who are too busy running the state, handling politics, or chasing their own ambitions to really connect with their partners. So, you've got this woman probably in a loveless marriage, probably surrounded by luxury but starved for emotional connection. And then, under her own roof, she sees Yusuf growing into this insanely handsome young man. Not just handsome in the shallow sense, but like magnetic, the kind of presence you can't ignore. And she doesn't just notice him, she can't stop thinking about him. This is where the story gets really raw and human. Because let's be honest, attraction is not something you can just flip off like a switch. When you're obsessed, it eats at you, it clouds your judgment. And Zuleikha, despite her status, despite her wealth, despite her being the wife of a high official, was completely consumed by her desire for Yusuf. The locked doors. So the Quran tells us about this one dramatic day. Zuleikha makes her move. She literally locks the doors. Not just one door, multiple doors. She wants to make sure no one can walk in. No witnesses, no interruptions. She's thought this through. And then she says the words that would change everything. Come to me, man. Imagine the weight of that moment. You've got this powerful, beautiful woman, his master's wife, standing in front of him, inviting him, basically ordering him. And Yusuf, he's young, he's a man, he has desires too. He's not a robot. But here's the kicker. He refuses. He says, I seek refuge in God. Think about the strength it takes to do that. Most people in that situation would have caved instantly. The excuses would have written themselves, well, I didn't really have a choice, or no one's gonna know, or this is my chance to finally feel good after all the crap I've been through. But Yusuf doesn't go there. He holds the line. And not just because he's scared of getting caught. The Quran makes it clear. He did it out of loyalty to God and loyalty to the man who had treated him well. That's integrity. That's character. The chase scene. But Zuleikha isn't done. The Quran describes this scene like a movie. She chases him through the house, desperate, maybe crying, maybe angry. Yusuf is running, literally sprinting to get away from her. She grabs at him, and in the struggle his shirt gets torn from the back. And just at that moment her husband walks in. Talk about a cliffhanger. Now what does Zuleikha do? Does she admit the truth? No. She flips it. She points at Yusuf and says, "What should be the punishment for someone who intended evil with your wife?" That's manipulation. But here's where justice comes in. A witness from her own household speaks up. They look at the shirt. If it's torn from the front, that means Yusuf went at her. If it's torn from the back, that means he was running away. And guess what? It's torn from the back. Boom. Yusuf is innocent. The gossip in the city. Now you'd think, okay, that's it, case closed. But no. Egypt was like any other society. People loved gossip. The story of this powerful woman throwing herself at her servant spreads through the city. The whispers start. Did you hear about the minister's wife? She's obsessed with him. And Zuleikha, instead of being humbled or embarrassed, she gets defiant. She wants to prove her point. So what does she do? She invites all these women to her house. She gives them fruit and knives. And then she tells Yusuf to walk out. And the moment they see him, they're so stunned by his beauty that they literally cut their own hands without even realizing it. They're like, this is not a man, this is an angel. And Zuleikha turns to them and says basically, see, you mocked me, but now you understand. This is why I couldn't resist him. Man, that's heavy. Imagine being Yusuf in that moment. He didn't ask for any of this. He didn't flirt, he didn't seduce, he didn't play games. But his very existence, his God-given beauty and character, became a test, not just for him but for everyone around him. Yusuf's prayer. At this point Yusuf is in a nightmare. He's trapped in a palace full of women who are openly obsessed with him. The pressure is the temptation is overwhelming. And so he prays. He says, "My Lord, prison is more beloved to me than what they are calling me to." Think about that. He'd rather be thrown into jail, literally locked up and stripped of freedom, than give in to desire and betray his value. That's strength. That's choosing long-term integrity over short-term pleasure. So here's where the story really gets wild, man. Because up to this point, Yusuf has proven his innocence, right? He resisted temptation. The evidence showed he didn't do anything wrong. The gossip was basically proof that women couldn't even handle being around him. You'd think this guy should be celebrated. He should be rewarded for his integrity. But nope, the exact opposite happens. Yusuf goes to prison. Zuleikha still has power. She's the wife of a top official. And instead of admitting defeat, she doubles down. She pressures her husband, she leans on her influence, and eventually Yusuf gets thrown into prison. Now pause here for a second. That's crazy. Imagine doing the right thing, staying loyal, resisting one of the strongest temptations a man can face, and your reward is jail time. That's the brutal reality of life sometimes. Doing the right thing doesn't always give you instant results. Sometimes it makes your life harder. Sometimes it gets you punished. And that's exactly what Yusuf faced. But here's the difference. Yusuf doesn't crumble. He takes prison as another test. He's like, okay, this is better than compromising my soul. That's some next level perspective, man. Most of us would have broken down like, why me? This isn't fair. But Yusuf takes it with patience. Yusuf in prison, wisdom behind bars. So in prison, Yusuf becomes this wise, respected guy. He interprets dreams, he counsels other inmates. He basically turns prison into a classroom of wisdom. That right there is a lesson. Your environment doesn't define you. Your mindset does. 2 prisoners come to him with dreams, and he interprets them. One of those interpretations ends up being a connection that leads him to Pharaoh later on. And that's how the story pivots from prisoner to prime minister. But hold that thought. Let's circle back to Zuleikha, the fall of Zuleikha. So, while Yusuf is sitting in prison, Zuleikha's life starts to unravel. Her reputation is destroyed by the scandal, her marriage weakens, and as years pass, her beauty fades, her wealth doesn't bring her peace, and she becomes this tragic figure. Here's the heartbreaking part. Her obsession with Yusuf never really leaves her. She had everything, wealth, power, status, but she lost it all because of one thing she couldn't control: desire. And man, that's such a human story. How many times have we seen powerful people in our own world, celebrities, politicians, athletes, crash and burn because they couldn't control their desires? Lust, greed, ego. These things can destroy you no matter how high you climb. Zuleikha's redemption, according to tradition. Now here's where the story gets really deep. The Quran doesn't go into every detail about Zuleikha's later life, but Islamic tradition fills in some fascinating layers. Years later, when Yusuf rises to power, when he goes from prisoner to basically the prime minister of Egypt, he encounters Zuleikha again, and she's not the same woman anymore. She's older, broken, humbled by life. Some traditions say she eventually repents. That she admits publicly, "It was me. I was the one who tried to seduce him. He was innocent, he's the one who was truthful." And if that's true, that's huge, because it shows that even someone who fell so deep into obsession and manipulation can find redemption through honesty and humility. It's like no matter how messed up you are, there's always a way back, if you're willing to admit the truth. The rise of Yusuf, from prisoner to prime minister. Meanwhile, Yusuf's story flips completely. Pharaoh has these troubling dreams, cows, corn, famine imagery, and none of his advisors can interpret them. But someone remembers this guy, Yusuf, back in prison, who had a knack for dream interpretation. So they call Yusuf out, and he nails it. He explains the dream. There will be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine, and he doesn't just interpret, he offers a plan. He says, store up food during the good years so we can survive the famine. Pharaoh is so impressed he puts Yusuf in charge. Just like that, the guy who was thrown into a dungeon becomes the most powerful man in Egypt after the king. That's insane. That's like going from inmate to Secretary of State overnight. But here's the thing, Yusuf never loses himself in power. He doesn't become arrogant. He stays grounded, humble, grateful to God. Zuleikha and Yusuf, the reunion. Now, according to some traditions, Yusuf and Zuleikha do eventually have another face-to-face encounter. And it's emotional, man. Because by then, she's no longer the seductive, manipulative woman she once was. She's broken but also sincere. She admits her mistake, she clears his name, and in some narrations, she even ends up marrying him later after her husband dies, and after she repents. Whether or not that part is historically confirmed, the symbolism is powerful. Desire that once led to destruction transforms into humility and redemption. Because you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, cool story from ancient times, what's it got to do with me? Everything. Man, because this story is about the eternal human struggle with desire. Every single one of us has a Zuleikha inside, that pull towards something we know we shouldn't have. And every one of us faces moments like Yusuf did, moments where we have to choose between short-term pleasure and long-term integrity. And here's the kicker. Choosing integrity usually comes with pain. Sometimes you lose opportunities, sometimes you get punished, sometimes people slander you, just like Yusuf. But in the long game, integrity wins. God sees it, the universe aligns with it. And even if you suffer in the moment, it leads you to a place of honor and strength. Zuleikha's story, on the other hand, is a warning. She had everything, but she lost it all because she couldn't master her own desire. That's real. How many people do we see today? Celebrities, politicians, athletes, destroyed by one scandal, by one bad choice. And Yusuf's story is the reminder, strength isn't about fighting lions or lifting weights. Real strength is saying no, when everything in you wants to say yes. Closing thoughts. The story of Yusuf and Zuleikha is heartbreaking, because it shows the chaos that happens when beauty, power and desire collide. But it's also inspiring because it shows the heights of integrity a human being can reach. Yusuf went from the bottom of a well to the heights of a throne, and he did it without ever betraying his values. Zuleikha went from the height of power to the depths of humiliation, but she eventually found redemption through truth. That's humanity right there. That's why this story has lasted thousands of years. It's not just history, it's a mirror.